Thank you for staying with us. Now, the federal government is taking a bold stride in initiating, quote, Nigeria First policy, end quote, a significant economic reform aimed at bolstering local industries and reducing reliance on foreign imports. This new policy came to light upon the Federal Executive Council approval, which is backed by an executive order signed by President Bola Tinubu. Minister of Information and National Orientation, Mohammed Idris, assured that this freshly chartered path places the interest of Nigerians at the center of all business activities to empower local industries and create a sustainable environment for producers and manufacturers. Joining us in our Abuja studio to shed light on this is a strategist, policy advisor, and the Group CEO, Global Investment and Trade Company, Baba Yusuf. Also joining us, we have a retired ACG, former head of Media, Nigeria Immigration Service, Sunday James. Gentlemen, good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us, Victoria, and the team.
Great.
Thank you, Victoria, Etoman, Ibrahim.
All right. Let me begin with you, Baba Yusuf. If you look down memory lane, remember 2016, we had the Buy Nigeria, Grow the Naira, all in a bid to promote Nigeria First and to also boost the value of the Naira. And here we are again talking about the Nigeria First policy. If we are to look at how far we have come, we're trying to push the local content in Nigeria. What do you think are the missing links of why we haven't achieved so much? So much so, the current administration thinks is now the way to go.
Thank you very much for that question. The first answer is lack of political will. The second answer is lack of a properly crafted, strategy to follow up to ensure that the strategic objective is achieved. Most of the time, these policies must be ingrained within the polity before it can work. The third reason why the previous attempts have failed is also due to lack of proper national development plan to ensure that the productive sector, is reactivated, having been comatose for decades, to be able to provide those required materials that will ensure that we buy only Nigerian products. Of course, further down the line, we'll discuss the reasons why we have not been able to reactivate our productive sector. That is the crucial, pillar that will ensure that we are able to buy Nigeria. The Buy Nigeria policy works. If we go back a memory lane again, 1933, when the United States of America, under the presidency of President Franklin Roosevelt, did the Buy America policy, there was a robust plan to also ensure that local production was boosted to ensure that that policy is sustained. So suffice it to say, I commend President Bola Ahmed Tinubu for reactivating this policy. What I expect is the BPP, who has been mandated to look at the entire procurement list and come up with a proper plan for restrictions to also ensure that we are working pari passu with enabling the critical infrastructure that will drive our productive, sector, and to also ensure that they are looking at it side by side with our trade policy agreements with our allies, so that we don't also shoot ourselves in the feet and run the risk of litigations and other issues.
Okay, Mr. Sunday, I have to ask you this. This Nigeria First, it's more like a revolution, I want to look at it from that point of view. And for that to work, we have to put this information not only in the minds of government workers, but the average Nigerian person. What is the way to go? How do we achieve this?
Thank you very much for using the term revolution. But it's an economic revolution.
Yes, it is.
Which is a very good one, and a kudos to Mr. President. To the average Nigerians, the policy behind local content in the Local Content Act, Section 41, Sub 2, mandates international and multinational companies to deploy local goods, services, and human capital of locally based platform for their services. What it means by implication is that goods, services, workforce, and every item that has to be deployed for project and infrastructure must be locally based according to the Act.
Okay, so my question will go to Baba Yusuf. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
First of all, in Akwana Nagesheka, Sanukade. So I'm going with my first question. My first question is, what is the role that consumers, and not just consumers, private sector, what can we, put in place to make sure that this will stand the test of time and not just something that we've spoken about and after some time it goes down the drill?
Well, thank you very much for that very good question. The key thing is we should just lean on the concept or the reality of demand and supply. And on the supply side, the supply side is quality. Much as we would like to comply or would like to, use locally made products and services, over time we all know that what determines demand is quality. One, first of all, availability. Two, quality. Three, and the pricing. Why am I calling pricing and quality? Because they are also a subset, of the economic vicious cycle of cost of production. We all know inflation is driving almost everything high as it is today. So how government is able to enable production, like I said earlier, in a way and manner that it scales down the cost, while ensuring also is still the responsibility of the various government agencies of government like the Standard Organization of Nigeria, NAFDAC, and others, to ensure that the quality and the standards are maintained so that people will be happy to continue to patronize locally made products. That being said, also we should know that there are some products, of course, that may not be within the restriction bracket, but the fact that we have them locally made qualitatively and with good competitive pricing will naturally push consumers to the local ones rather than the international, the foreign procured goods and services. So it is very important while this law is put in place, like I said, we put the strategic pillars, i.e. ensure the productive sector is active, ensure there is standards, and of course to work along the line of ensuring that we scale down all the economic variables that are on the high. Of course, with the global tariff Trump dance, it is also good because all countries are looking inwards to see how they can be creative to retain foreign forex and to also ensure that we boost export in the long term.
Yeah, Mr. Sunday James, I'll definitely come to you, but because I want to quickly do a follow-up on what Yusuf Baba Ahmed actually said. Because one thing is, as a policy strategist, if you look at what this might definitely birth, it could lead to what is known as economic nationalism turning protectionist. For instance, if you look at the trade war between US and China, with America saying, yes, America first. And now when we are now saying, yes, Nigeria first policies we want to adopt, very good. But critics are wondering that this might definitely scare off investors or triggering retaliatory trade actions. Where do we now draw the line between national interest and economic isolationism?
I will take the word national interest as very, very paramount for every nation that wants to grow. So as a nationalist leader we're having, Nigeria first is apt and now. So when it comes to the issue of isolation or protectionist ideology, every nation has the right to protest its interests. and is for the benefit of the larger society. As much as that trade policy has no conflict with other bilateral or multilateral arrangements or policies globally, it is a welcome idea. But what I can see from Mr. President's pronouncement is a domestic economic revolution that is supposed to turn around the economy of the country and give Nigerians the first opportunity to be able to deliver their best. And that has a lot of advantage for Nigeria. It will reduce brain drain. It will also bring competitive edge between us and international companies and organizations. It will create job opportunity. It will drive in a lot of resources for us. Instead of people sending our funds overseas, we will have enough money that will come into the country because the items that are supposed to be purchased are going to be locally based, the services and the workforce. So the money will be here with us instead of it being taken outside. So it has a lot of advantage put together because we cannot continue to be sending the resources out while we are crying in-house that we are not having enough funds. So it's a very, very welcome idea, and Nigerians should buy into this policy because it is not a new policy, it's a rejig. It's a reactivation.
All right.
So Mr. President has done well by making sure that he wakes people up from sleep.
Right, indeed. Baba Yusuf, I wonder if you're on the same page with Mr. Sunday James on the last question, his response to my colleague's question on how we can draw the line and still maintain this robust relationship with international counterparts. Because earlier on, you mentioned that the policy has to be robust. We have to have a productive strategy and holistic plan at pushing this forward. How do we achieve this?
Yes, like I said earlier, we can only achieve it if we have a strategy to it. Otherwise, it will fail. What do I mean by that? It is good that we have the policy in place. In the short term, the big players in the local industry, like the Dangote refinery, for example, Boa Cement and others, Innocent Motors and others, will be likely the ones that will be able to make the impact. But suffice it to say that some of them still have challenges of capacity, for example, Innocent Motors and others, who still require some materials for them to keep to the demand because there's high demand already. Remember that even for this administration, there was an attempt by the federal government and some state governments to procure vehicles from Innocent, but the order level was so high that Innocent could not keep up with the pace. So increasing capacity of the productive sector remains a critical success factor on the top line. But the crucial success factor over and above the top line is the middle scale and the small scale industry in the productive sector, ladies and gentlemen, because that is where you will see the impact of products and services, and particularly with regards to the agri-value chain. If we go and look at, for example, the about 4 million students that go to school, primary, secondary school in Nigeria, every renewal of session, they have to make uniforms. What makes uniform is cotton. So we must understand that there's an interlink, intersectorial interlink, and that is why we have a need for a strategy, not silo-driven policies that may not make the impact and be sustainable as we have seen over time due to the gaps within the value chain of our strategy and sectorial for that matter. So it is very important that pari passu this are happening as we are progressing, so that in the mid to long term it remains sustainable. Otherwise, we'll now have to go back and start procuring again after a year or two. Power remains a critical success factor. If we don't address the power deficit in Nigeria, then this will just be another flash in the pan, because without power, we will not be able to make any progress. So these are the things that need to be in place. And like in the case of the American policy, follow up to 1933 by America, in 1979, the president brought another very important initiative with regards to bilateral agreements with other countries, to be creative, to say we will not take complete products. So 50% will be made within the country. Maybe we bring in what they call CKD, completely knock down items, then we assemble them here. That will also reduce cost of production. So it's not just about entirely banning. We should also have a strategy to address, like I said, where we have deficits, to say we have to review our bilateral trade agreements with some of these countries to ensure that we have sustainability until we are fully independent to a large extent for the key items we require, which has to do with the agri-sector, it has to do with the power sector and other critical sectors that are still in dire need of not just reform, but revolution.
All right, Mr. Sunday James, you are a former head of media, NIS and Interpol. That means media is part of the thing you do. So I want to ask you a question that has to do with the media. Policies like this come out from government and all that, but the people accepting the policy and running with it is a great part of the success of that policy. How do we use the media to achieve this, sir?
There's need for public engagement. There's need for public sensitization and education. And there's also need for the government to win the confidence of the citizen by ensuring that things that need to be put in place to make sure that this local content issue work is put in place. And what are the things that need to be put in place? Just like Bala said earlier on, the issue of electricity is very, very vital. Well-trained workforce, because if you don't have well-trained workforce and you say the experts that are coming in should not come, it's an issue. The services that has to be rendered must be also topmost. So I would rather say Nigeria should adopt globalization. What I mean by the term globalization is that we should think global and behave local. By that standard, what it means is that we should be able to operate by level of our thoughts and intent at global level, while we disseminate or while we discharge our local assignments. Can I also bring in this, that as a former head of media and a veteran in the field, I've just retired from the Northeast, and I know what it means if we are able to have locally produced items that are locally based here. It will help our military forces and security. Like we just have a young Nigeria called Oluwatobi Oyinlola, who has just designed the world's smallest GPS, global position system, a tracking device that can be deployed for security assignment. He's a Nigerian, and he's in the Guinness Book of Records. He has just designed it. Such a person can be brought to the country to continue with others, for us to have a lot of them. Instead of importing, we have that kind of a system. Is the smallest GPS design in the world, of capacity 22.93 times 11.92 mm. That's a big kudos to Nigeria. So we have a lot of Oluwatobi outside the country and within the country. We must harness them and put them in place. And also for the training of the young officers, we should stop looking outside. We have a lot of generals that have a lot of wealth of experience and training that they got from outside. They should be allowed to do local content. In all the services, we have a lot of senior officers that have retired and then not doing much. Why don't we tap into their local knowledge and allow this thing to work for us? Because we cannot solve our problem with international idea. We can only solve our peculiar problem with our local idea, and it will work for us.
And it's just beautiful. I love the way that we are giving accolades to Nigerians, how innovative, they have been over a period of time. But my question is timelines. Are we working with timelines? Because it's a beautiful initiative, but I am worried looking at the fact that I just hope it doesn't go down the drill. I don't know if there's already a timeline, or would you think that it would be very important to put a timeline that at this particular time, we are consuming only local products, no more foreign products?
In addition to timelines, also to measure performance and impacts and do impact assessment to ensure that, first of all, the policy is working in terms of driving government expenditure down, in terms of adding value to the economy, and also in terms of building capacity, like I said, and then rejigging or improving as we proceed. That is the only way. So it's a very good question, because that is the only way we can ensure sustainability. Another very important point I have to make here is the lack of, my opening remarks, I mentioned political will. Why it has failed, remember also, I think it was during President Jonathan or President Buhari when they banned the importation of furniture, for example. And people were still flying in furniture. Senators and public office holders were still bypassing this policy. And if that continues to happen in this particular instance, then the objective would be defeated. As we have seen many times, it is political will that will ensure the success of such very important policy. Leadership, quintessential leadership from the front, to ensure that not just procurement of the items, but the process itself ensures that this kind of, bypasses can be, eradicated. Of course, unless you measure the impacts time to time, and I like the point when you talked about timeline, not just timeline of execution, but timeline of measuring impacts and measuring performance is the only way that you will ensure sustainability along the lines of those crucial, pillars of success. Otherwise, in the next 1 year, we are going into elections. That will now not be the focus. And before you know, it will also go the same way the previous executive orders went.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen, for your insightful contributions. Strategist, policy advisor, and Group CEO, Global Investment and Trade Company, Baba Yusuf. Retired ACG, former head of media, Nigeria Immigration Service, Sunday James. Thank you as well. Our time is up. And we need to go, unfortunately, but thank you so much again for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us on board.
Great, great. Well, so much has been said by the gentlemen, particularly love localization mentioned by Mr. Sunday James when he said, think global and act local. And then he also mentioned we cannot address our local problems with international ideas. And that's the truth. And then Baba Yusuf talking about we having robust policy and proper plan, productive, especially for the productive sector. And he raised concerns of timelines that you spoke about, how critical it is, and also, of course, setting the pace so that we know that we are in this for the long haul and it is not something that it is a short-term plan at the end of the day. But go ahead, Ibrahim.
Most definitely. So we just must look at it from another angle, which could be legal, because if you look at Africa, we are looking at opening up Africa, where we talk about AfTA, Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, which is a policy that, yes, you need to open up your border so that you transact among yourselves before you even think of taking your goods outside of the African continent, so as to engender development within the region, whether ECOWAS or on a larger scale. So we have to also look at that. If we are not, fine, it's good to promote our own local content, but if we are not, jeopardizing, this move, then we know that, yes, we are. The
president is part of ECOWAS, and yes, he understands what that is. But if he, and so I believe that he is not taking this step in isolation. He must have also considered the Africa Trade Agreement, Free Trade Agreement, which is critical to ECOWAS's development. So I don't think that, from my perspective, that is a challenge here. From my perspective.
Yes, most definitely. Sorry, before you come in, it is not to say, it is one thing for the president to say, yes, this is what we want to do. It's another thing for the implementation. So it's at the implementation level that we need to think, generally, how are we going to go about it? And it's good that our guests really spoke well to it. But if you're doing that, we need to also make sure that our electricity, survives. Our electricity is up to the task, because if you do not have if you do not solve our energy sector, then how do we talk about industrialization, boosting, and so if you don't resolve it, so how do we achieve it?
It's one policy that speaks to a whole lot of things that are deficient in Nigeria right now. Ease of doing business, for example.
Absolutely.
If you want to run this policy very well, you have to look at the small and medium-scale enterprises. That's where the bulk of the workforce is. I always say, look, these guys employ more than anybody can ever employ, including government. So you want to make things easy for them to start their business, to grow their business, and to do the employment as much as possible. That way, they can produce these things that Nigeria needs, so that the country can say, you have first refusal.
But quickly, I'll just say something that in as much as we know the situations, in Nigeria, I still believe that we can take the step. And I would say something. If you go to Aja, if you see the furnitures that these Nigerians are making, and even in the economy that we find ourselves, that is not so solid, no lights and everything, they are still putting out good work. So I think that we should just take the step. As we take the step, things will be done. We've been speaking on this table about, getting better electricity and all of that. I believe that, the government is listening. And for them to say this, bring this kind of initiative, they will definitely, follow through with it. But we need to take the first step first.
Of course, a lot has been happening. Talk about Aba. For instance, go to Aba, you'll find so many things being produced out of your shoes and your clothing. Go there, you'll find it.
In different parts, is clothing human beings.
In different parts of the country, so much is already happening. A lot of people are not even waiting on government for these policies. All they are waiting for is that give us the environment to thrive. When you talk about getting credits from banks, even the big names get credit from banks. But most of these smaller businesses do not have the opportunity those bigger business owners have, and they're saying give us a level playing field. That's all we want. Does not then if you talk about generating electricity, a lot of people are their own PhD as it is. A lot of persons are already doing that. So all they want is give us access to these things that you give other persons who are at that level, so we all can have an environment that thrives. That's the bottom line.
But we're taking the first step. Let us take the first step. The remaining things will be done. So please, let's not discourage our
nobody is discouraging anybody.
Take the first step.
Nigerians do not need you to encourage them. They encourage themselves. That's the thing about Nigerians. That's why you find them thriving in any society. But let's quickly go on this break. In our next conversation, we will discuss insecurity in Zamfara and the counter-terrorism effort.